this is Eclipse Zero again with my Dark Souls 2 bow only run. This is the second part. If you haven't seen the first part, please go and check out the first part if you have not already done so, as it will fill you in on where we are so far. And with that, let's get right into it. So we just started out now on our second part after defeating the last giant. So I'm trying to perform an exploit I saw to get the Ring of Blades without actually defeating the pursuer, and I was unable to pull it off, and you only get one chance to do it, so I ended up having to do it the traditional way of going to his boss room and defeating him that way. So first things first is that I wanted to go up to the platform where you can choose to fight him early because of the SS flash shard that is up there. And this turtleneck is giving me a hard time, and I decided to leave and reset the area so I didn't die. And now that I have finally gotten up to the platform, I went and looted as much as I possibly could. And getting the most important thing, the SS flash shard. And out of nowhere, this guy comes in and finishes me off. So now that we have the soldier's key from the last giant, you can now go up to the pursuer's boss room. These royal soldiers are very tough, they don't take much damage, and so I decided, well, maybe I could just run past them and straight into the boss room. I probably could have done that if I didn't stop for this one item, though. That was probably my mistake that didn't allow me to do so. Because they trapped me before going into the boss room, and they absolutely destroy me. So being a bit smarter this time, I went and grabbed my stuff and immediately ran into the fog gate and started the boss fight. Now, I guess technically here you could consider it to be a failure of the bow only challenge, but here's my rationale for it, is the damage that I did was terrible. Now it's not about to sit here with it's not really possible, he has too much defense. So I went and I said, well, a giant ballista, that's kind of a bow, a very big bow. So I ended up just using the ballista because I really didn't want to be here forever, and frankly I'm not even sure it's possible to defeat him with the bow in the traditional sense like that. So I almost finished him off, except for I hesitated, and so I had to set up the shot again in order to finish off the boss fight. I went and I immediately equipped the Ring of Blades as it gives you a flat damage boost to your attacks. I went and quickly grabbed the Drain Link set and went to the Lost Bastille. And I then grabbed the Dull Ember for the blacksmith so that I could purchase items from him later. And he also did an absurd amount of damage with one little baby fireball and almost one-shot me. I was then invaded by the Forlorn, which is an NPC exclusive to the Scholar of the First Sin edition. And I went and parried him, and I shot him in the head, and it did a very minuscule amount of damage. There was no quick way of me defeating him until I had a plan. AI is not very smart, and so I ended up just slapping him to death. I then went and blew up the wall leading to the blacksmith so that I could warp there later. And he is very important to this run, as he is the only blacksmith that sells unlimited numbers of iron arrows. I went and also grabbed all of the items that were within the shop, mostly upgrade materials. From here, it was a very big upgrade to get the longbow. I didn't have the stats for it quite yet, but that was quickly able to change since I had enough souls to level up. And reinforced the longbow up to +6. Because he also sells large titanite shards, I can do it at the same time. Compared to a default short bow, a +6 longbow with the required stats is a much needed upgrade. I also put a couple of points into Dex, Vigor, and Endurance. And I then used the rest of my souls to buy iron arrows. I then went and tested my new found damage on the dogs and was quite happy with the results. I then went to Heide's Tower of Flame, the next area of the game, as there are two bosses in this area. There's the Dragon Rider and the old Dragon Slayer. So I went with the Dragon Rider first, as he is much easier. But first I had to get through the area, and all these knights are they have very high defenses. However, they do take a decent amount of damage from my upgraded bow and even the base wooden arrows. The most important thing for me early was to get this Ring of Binding, as it would help me with my HP penalty due to death, because I knew I was going to be dying a heck of a lot during this run, and I wanted to be able to save my effigies for when they really mattered. I then went into the boss room and I did a damage test. 143, not bad. I did a pretty good amount of damage to him. I had, roughly 30 arrows to deal with him. I knew I could do it. And I also showed him a good fist parry. And just to make this not as tedious for you to view, I went and sped this up. The fight was fairly simple. Simple dodge, get behind him, and shoot him full of arrows. He doesn't have a whole lot of health, as he is meant to be a pretty early boss. You can either choose to do the forest first or the Tower of Flame. It's usually a 50-50 for newer players, so it just depends on what order you really want to go in. However, the +7 bow was much needed to get through, and I wanted to get that as early as I possibly could. And with that, I was quickly able to finish off the Dragon Rider with minimal problems. I then went back to Majula, leveled up a few times. I went back to Macduff, the blacksmith, and I purchased some arrows. And I had to ration out my souls because I didn't have much. And I decided that maybe I should change that. So I went to the armorer and I asked to borrow his threads. And so I just asked him politely.
Curses upon you, enough of this. You won't get me.
Now the clothes that he has on is very mediocre, but the effect on them is what's important. It increases the amount of souls you gain from defeated enemies, and having a full set on greatly increases that. This would help me with getting souls and not put me in much of a tight spot as I would probably have without it. I then went back up to go to the next boss, where I was promptly roasted by a dragon, and I finally made it onto the platform without getting knocked off. I then proceeded to fill this poor dragon full of arrows and make him a new pincushion. It wasn't a very difficult one. There was a couple very close calls. Besides that, it was pretty uneventful. I then quickly grabbed the old Radiant Life Gem and the 5 human effigies. I decided that maybe 36 arrows was not enough, so I went back to Majula, used the souls that I had gathered to level up. I went back to Macduff and grabbed some more arrows, just to make sure I had a decent amount. Afterwards, I returned to the old Dragon Slayer, and I was pleasantly surprised with the amount of damage that I was doing. Considering that he's in a full suit of armor, I was dreading this fight and assumed that it would be terrible and long. Now it was fairly long, but it wasn't very threatening of a boss fight. It was very telegraphed. I could easily tell when to go in for a hit, and I was able to finish him off quite easily. I then went back to Majula and leveled up with the souls from the old Dragon Slayer, getting up to 20 vigor and 25 dexterity and 14 endurance. I went back to Heide's tower and went into the tunnels to head to No Man's Wharf, as that's the next area. I also went and grabbed the Sublime Bone Dust, which boosts the effectiveness of your heals from the Estus Flask. I honed my skills with my bow and landed quite a few headshots, one-shotting these poor pirate guys. I then said hello to the descendants of Gollum as I was making my way through. I then met an unfortunate end due to enemies hitting through walls. That felt real good. I was pretty sad. Got slapped. I then found Gavlin on the way back, and he is a very good merchant. He sells mostly poison related items like throwing knives, and what's important is poison arrows. I bought what he had. He had about 20 on stock, and later in the game he will sell more. Kicked down the bridge to open up the shortcut, and finally grabbed the last remaining few important items that I needed from No Man's Wharf. And with that, we'll be continuing the adventure with defeating the area boss of No Man's Wharf and continuing our adventure in part 3. Thanks again for joining me on part 2, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more, and have a good rest of your day.